Well, I see the Queen, that grumpy hereditary German dictator, has given the Queen's speech on behalf of her government. You see, it's her government, not the people's government, it's her government. That wrinkly old lady has allowed her government to proceed with the policies presented to her. They say the Queen has no power. They say she is there just to bring in the tourists. Well, how can she shut down the Canadian Parliament 3 times with no power? How come she owns 6.6 billion acres of land worldwide, making her the biggest landowner in the world? Of course, she's got no power. The Queen is incredibly powerful, and this is why she and the rest of the royals simply have to go. They are parasites. Anyway, 3 things in the Queen's speech stood out to me today. The EU referendum bill. Cameron is still at this point saying that he's going to give us an in-out referendum before the end of 2017. I personally don't think this will happen for whatever reason. Probably a terror attack is my guess. The second one that caught my eye is the extremism bill. This will be the Snoopers Charter, rushed through at lightning speed, allowing the UK to literally be turned into a police state with Big Brother watching our every move right in front of our eyes, whilst ISIS are allowed to recruit on Facebook and Twitter and to broadcast anything they want on YouTube. You see, you won't be able to get your message across because you're a sensible person pointing out the government's failings. But ISIS, well, they play into the government's hands for clamping down on domestic liberties at home, so they will be able to carry on doing what they're doing regardless. And the third thing that caught my eye in the Queen's speech was the Scotland bill. Cameron says he's going to implement the Smith Commission. I just want to say something about the whole Scottish issue. I find it a little strange. We had this article yesterday from the Huffington Post. Nicola Sturgeon calls for double lock to prevent Scotland EU referendum exit. SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon has used her first major economic speech since the general election to call for a double lock on a British exit from the EU. Speaking at Heart of Midlothian FC Stadium in Edinburgh on Tuesday, the MSP reiterated her vow to fight for Scotland's continued membership and piled pressure on the Prime Minister not to force EU withdrawal on any nation whose electorate reject separatism in the upcoming EU referendum. We will propose a double majority, meaning that exit from the European Union is only possible if all 4 nations of the UK agree to it, something which would ensure that Scotland couldn't be forced out of the EU against our will, she said. I understand that Scotland wants to be independent from England and Westminster. After all, who wouldn't? Westminster are just a bunch of corrupt charlatans only working for big business and banks. They simply haven't got an interest in the general public. But if you think that gaining independence from the UK and remaining in the EU means that you will be a free and independent country, then you are seriously mistaken. Now I know I'm at risk of annoying some of my Scottish viewers. There aren't very many viewers at all, but anyway, it has to be said, whilst you're in the EU, you simply aren't free. The EU dictate anywhere between 50 and 75% of our laws at the moment. Do you think this figure's going to go down, or do you think that figure's going to go up? This will also happen in a free Scotland. You simply will not be able to make your own laws. At the moment, Brussels decides what's best for the UK, and as a free and independent Scotland, Brussels will also decide what's best for a free Scotland. If you remain in the EU, then you will not be able to control your borders in a free Scotland. You will be dictated to by 28 unelected commissioners. Commissioners that you cannot vote for and you cannot hold to account, ever. But these are the people that will tell you what to do in a free and so-called independent Scotland. It's not out of the frying pan into the fire, it's out of the frying pan into the furnace. This is why a large swathe of the population in the UK want us to remove ourselves completely from the dictatorial EU. Remember, the EU want ever closer union, so a free Scotland that remains in the EU will one day just become a state in a larger United States of Europe, and that will mean that 100% of your laws will then be dictated to you by unelected bureaucrats in the EU. Does that sound like a free and independent Scotland? Let me remind you how democratic new laws are created in the EU. The EU Commission come up with a new bill. Say, I don't know, that the firstborn on the first of every month has to be sacrificed on your front lawn to Tony Blair. This bill is then passed from the unelected Commission to another group in the EU that's so secret nobody actually knows who's in that group. It's then passed to the EU Parliament to vote on. The MPs vote 99% to 1% to kill the bill. This bill then returns to the EU Commission. The EU Commission then decide if they're going to force nation states to implement this bill or not. The vote of the MEPs means nothing. The European members of Parliament are 100% ceremonial. If the EU Commission decide that this bill to kill the firstborn of every family sacrificed to Tony Blair is to be passed, then they force it upon the nation states and they have to implement it. And if they don't, they face massive fines. And don't forget that when there's a banking collapse, new EU rules now state that the depositors and shareholders will pay before any taxpayers. It's very democratic when it comes to the EU. Just what a free and independent Scotland would want, eh? All I'm saying is Scotland, be careful what you wish for. Leaving the EU is great, all power to you. But leaving the UK to be swallowed up by the EU is just insanity. If you know what the EU is really all about, you will be neither free or independent if you want to remain with the European Union.